All right, everybody. No rest for the wicked, right? And so here I am right back because I've got to introduce our very excellent next speaker. Somebody who, along with my friend Hugh Newman, I have followed JJ's work for a very long time. And this is our first meeting in person, so this is wonderful. JJ Ainsworth is a researcher and field explorer whose work in ancient symbolism and comparative archaeology reveals deep cross-cultural connections between prehistoric civilizations. And through extensive fieldwork across North and South America, Europe, and Turkey, she has documented recurring megalithic symbols and astronomical alignments that suggest a sophisticated global symbolic language. She's going to tell you more about this, and I highly recommend that you not only enjoy this lecture, but check her out on social media as well. Without further ado, JJ Ainsworth.
Well, hi everybody, and thank you for the introduction. So my talk I'm going to do a little bit different than other people because I have so much information for you. I've got to read straight through. I have some notes, and I have to get it all correct, so my apologies. So I'm going to speak about astronomy, archaeoastronomy, which is the investigation of the astronomical knowledge of the prehistoric peoples. I'll be talking about astromythology and the importance of it for our ancient ancestors. So I'm also going to be discussing some of the complex symbolism and ancient alignments found at the Taj Templar sites. This information is important because these amazing structures are rewriting our timeline of history right now. And these places contain some of the most important archaeological finds ever. Today, we know that the skies are filled with planets, stars, constellations, plenty of life, and other things. But what did the heavens hold for our ancient ancestors, and what did it mean to them? So those twinkling lights in the sky were not just pretty objects to them, but they were maps. They were stories and they were tales. The night sky was filled to the brim with endless myths holding information about our past and our future. The heavens were the realm of the gods and other mysterious celestial beings. The sky was the home of the revered ancestors and a place to live again after death. And all of those things together taught us many skills, including how to survey the land and the heavens. And with this knowledge, the ancients created sky tools, like this 3,600-year-old Nebra disk, and I'll talk about this later as well. So the symbolism depicted at the Taj Templar sites like Göbekli Tepe indicates that some of the oldest myths in the world were probably recited there. These sites are close to 12,000 years old. And I have to quickly do a tedious thing and introduce you how myth reconstruction is done. And we're gaining new evidence for linguistic migration paths all the time. So mythology provided explanations for the creation of the world, the origins of humanity, and the nature of the universe. And the earliest forms of mythology were carried on through oral traditions and symbolism, often during gatherings and other major events and ceremonies. This ancient reconstructed myth I will soon read probably came all the way down to the Tepe sites in Turkey, which is circled in orange, from the red rectangle highlighted area of the Russian and the Eurasian steppes. And that area for our history is extremely important, and a lot of people don't realize this, but it'll come to light in a few years. Ancient myths can and have been reconstructed by linguistic analysis by etymologists, philologists, and linguists. They study the history of languages by looking closely at literature and oral traditions. They can figure out some of the earliest forms of myths by comparing and contrasting stories from around the world. This chart shows the various migration branches of the Proto-Indo-European language. And in these migration pathways, the ancient myths traveled as well. So who are the Proto-Indo-Europeans, also known as Pi? And why are they important? Pi is the reconstructed common ancestor of the Indo-European language family. The Indo-European migrations are hypothesized migrations of peoples shown on this map and whom spoke Proto-Indo-European and the derived Indo-European languages. So all of the highlighted countries above speak languages that were influenced by Pi. The dark blue areas where Indo-Europeans is actually a primary language. So they had a huge influence on us today all across the world. This is a simple chart showing the evolution of the ancient myth I'll read. The key concepts are highlighted in yellow, such as the first priest, the first king, the first humans, and the heavenly gods. They all remain the same, only slightly changing throughout time. And these characters are involved with creation, divine twins, a cosmic bull, and a third man. And these are all across the world. And this is the primordial story that even led to the famous twins Romulus and Remus that created Rome. The ancients might tell an engaging and entertaining story, but make no mistake, these were teaching tools, which today a lot of the meanings have been forgotten. Today, archaeology generally consists of looking to the ground, and this was explicitly expressed during an interview with the director of Göbekli Tepe, Nachmi Karel. So he was asked about the winter solstice alignment that Hugh and I discovered in 2021, and he responded by saying, "We look in the ground and not to the sky." And that's just astounding to me, because a marriage between the different disciplines, such as archaeoastronomy, archaeology, and other forms or history in general, they need to come together to actually understand the ancients thoroughly, and we're just not doing that today. So imagine yourself at night, sat huddled with friends and loved ones inside these structures at Göbekli Tepe, with fires lit under the star-twinkled darkness of the heavens, as you listen intently to one of the elder and wizened storytellers tell the tale of the great creation of the world and the primordial twins. And these bright twinkling stars you now sat under are the very ones that the story you will hear is teaching you about. Here begins a more than 20,000-year-old primordial creation tale. In the beginning, before time, there was only darkness. And from the darkness, time began. And when time began, so the cosmos produced fire and ice. This was the beginning of the cosmos. And within it, two brothers formed, and they were twins. Their names Manus, which means man, and his giant brother called Yimo. Yimo means twin. And also, floating with them through the cosmos was a giant cow. Through time, gods were created, both good and chaotic. And through the cosmos, they all traveled. Through the eons, they lived, grew, and continued to travel until the brothers decided that they needed a home, a world on which to live, to inhabit, to create a place of order from the chaos of the cosmos. But this was not easy, as to create this world, a sacrifice had to be made. And so it was that Yimo agreed to be sacrificed, and Manus did kill his brother Yimo. And this was the first death, and so death was introduced into the cosmos. And so Manus offered Yimo's body to Deus Vetur, the divine daylight sky father, and the god was pleased. And so Yimo, the first dead man, became king of the dead, and thus his realm he opened for all those who followed after. Manus cut Emo's body into pieces, and from these pieces he created the sun, the moon, the sea, the stars, the winds, and earthly fire. From this dismemberment of the giant Emo, it was his flesh that became the earth, his hair grass, his blood water, his eyes the sun, his mind the moon, his brain the clouds, his breath the wind. After this was all completed, a new world formed. His head created the heavens, and even yet his bones did yield stones. Manus did descend to this earth and saw the world, and all seemed pure. And in this new world, he would become the first priest. Manus sought after the great cosmic bull whom had nourished him, and with whom he had traveled through the cosmos for eons and eons. Manus slew the great cosmic bull, and in doing this, he became the first priest and began ritual sacrifice, as this sacrifice would allow the world and everything inside and outside of it to be kept in order. And so this is the way it always must be. And Manus, dismembering the great bull, watched on as all living animals came from its body, one springing forth from another, and so on. And all edible plants were created too, and all this nourishing the land and causing the earth to become fertile. And finally, Manus created the people, those like you and I. But the very first people created was Trito, and Trito means third. And as Manus had sacrificed his twin, Emo, and the cosmic bull to Skyfather and to the other gods, it was then that all gods showed their approval. And with their approval gave cattle to Trito, a gift to allow the newly created people to be rich in food and materials. And all seemed good. But on this world, chaos had been waiting, and it had found a home there. And the people's cattle were stolen under cover of the night in a treacherous move by the three-headed, six-eyed serpent Ingwe. Trito was not strong enough to fight off the serpent. And so, in time, he too made a sacrifice. In honor of the great storm god, he offered the prepared ritual drink. In order to gain the god's strength for a fight with the evil serpent, and the storm god was pleased and came to the earthly plane and offered to go with Trito to fight Ingwe. And so together the god and the man did travel far into the mountains beyond the borders of their land to retrieve the cattle. When they arrived at the serpent's cave, they together battled Ingwe, that chaotic three-headed serpent, and eventually slew him, allowing Trito to bring the cattle home. With the cattle free and back on the land of the people, it was then that Trito was recognized as the first warrior and hunter, a hero that the people needed. And he was celebrated for recovering the wealth of the people and ensuring the priests received cattle for sacrifice to thank the gods for all they had done for them. And so, in celebration, the first priest Manus created a sacrificial fire and over it killed a bull, offering it to the gods, the flames and smoke reaching high into the sky. There, Skyfather and the other gods received that sacrifice, ensuring their share, keeping the gods content, encouraging them to keep chaos away. And in return, the gods continued to give cattle to the people. And Manus continued to sacrifice, and a new king was crowned, and he was also called Emo in honor of the self-sacrifice of this great twin. And this King Emo was also prepared to sacrifice himself to keep the people safe and the land fertile. And Trito continued to keep the cattle safe. And this cattle and its sacrifice ensured the fertility of the earth, all living things upon it, and it kept the cosmos in order. So the myth I just read to you is extremely old. Some people say it's more than 20,000 years old, and it's reconstructed through bits and pieces. But it's a teaching tool, and it was teaching you about a specific area of the sky. So the divine twins, Yemo and Manus, baby the star constellation Gemini. And the Orion constellation being the first hunter and priest slaying the great heavenly bull of Taurus. So, as I said, this area of the sky was important, extremely important to the ancient people. So I have to discuss a small bit of astronomy with you, so it'll just help things be a little bit clearer. So the ecliptic, marked in red, is the invisible plane containing the Earth's orbit around the sun. And from the view of an observer on Earth, the sun's movement around the celestial sphere over the course of a year marks out a path along the ecliptic against a background of stars. Eventually, you will see that the ecliptic passes through the constellations of the zodiac. The path of the sun passes through 13 background constellations. These are the modern astrological signs that are common today. 12 of them, except Ophiuchus, are called the zodiac constellations. The moon and planets always travel close along the virtual line of the ecliptic. And so why is that important? So the ancients studied the movement of the heavenly bodies along this ecliptic. They tracked the sun across the sky, marking its northern and most points. And with this information and tools, they could accurately predict celestial events. And they used this information to build calendars like Stonehenge and to create the Nebra disk I previously showed. The symbols on the disk are interpreted generally as the sun and full moon, a lunar crescent, and stars, including a cluster of 7 stars that may represent the Pleiades, another very important area of the sky. This is up for debate, though. I mean, there are many people that argue against this. The disk was designed to be used at the latitude where it was found near Nebra, Germany, and the markings and astronomical representations on the disk are calibrated to the solar cycle and the sky positions observed specifically there and would not work in any other location. Another interesting thing about the Nebra sky disk is that 2 identical swords were found with it. So one for each of the divine twins. 2 golden arcs that were along the sides are thought to mark the angle between the solstices, though one of the arcs is now missing. The solstices are the times when the sun reaches its farthest points north and south of the celestial equator. And Hugh will be doing a talk later that will go deep into the solstices and their importance. So this ancient artifact is really interesting to me, not just because of the showing summer and winter solstices, but for its careful acknowledgement of the twins or the Gemini constellation. And I'll talk about this later. So I'm going to delve into Göbekli Tepe and other Taj Templar sites. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to keep time, but forgive me if I get a little bit over. So Taj Templar simply means stone mountains or hills. Some of these sites are close to 12,000 years old, and they don't just consist of artifacts on the ground, but they are related to the heavens. I've been to many of these sites in Turkey over many years, and I have to say they really are going to change the way we look at the world. They are completely throwing everything out of the water. I mean, it's just changing. So they were created during the transition from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to settled agricultural communities in the region. And they're famous for the T-shaped pillars that make up the outer ring of the enclosures. But this is not always the case in some of the lesser-known sites. Some of the other sites have square-shaped enclosures. There are many of these Taj Templar sites, and here are just a few marked on the map by the T's. So, as I said, I've been to many of these sites, and this is actually from Göbekli Tepe. And this was before the excavations even started, and you can just walk around and see the T-pillars. And the landowner is a good friend of ours now, and we'll go have tea with him, and it's really lovely. But in Turkey, once you have an important archaeological site, the military gets involved. So these areas are militarily controlled, which can cause a bit of a, kerfluffle, some things. Me and Hugh have gotten into a bit of trouble, mostly because of him. So I'm going to discuss the symbolism on the central twin pillars in the oldest stone circle at Göbekli Tepe, and these are pillars 18 and 31, the twins. So we'll find something interesting out, perhaps. Since I first actually saw these pillars, I immediately associated them with the super ancient myths, the primordial divine twins. So the necklace pendant on pillar 18 seems to show an H-like symbol, but more likely it's two beings holding hands, and I postulate that this is showing the constellation of Gemini. In Greek mythology, Gemini were known as the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux. Since all planets, as well as the sun and moon, which is shown below Gemini on the image above, always move very closely along the virtual line of the ecliptic, like I mentioned before, all these orbiting bodies are regularly passing through a special asterism, which I'll talk about later, in which the builders of Göbekli Tepe seem to not just know about, but to precisely pinpoint with their symbolism. In some depictions of the constellation, the twins are even holding hands, just like in the stone carving shown above, and the virtual ecliptic line goes through the middle of the Gemini twins, shown by the dotted red line in the white image. So the sun and moon traveling through the Gemini twins, just like it does in the night sky, may be depicted actually here on the carving, which is quite cool. So in the crook of the arm of the pillar 18, it holds a fox or a dog. So let's look at what is next to Gemini in the night sky. It's Canis Minor, which is a dog. So in ancient times, the constellation may have also been seen as a fox or a dog, The symbolism found at the base of the same pillar shows 7 water birds or chicks. So I believe these 7 birds at the bottom of pillar 18 are the Pleiades star cluster in the constellation of Taurus. This cluster is commonly known as the 7 sisters, the 7 chicks, and almost always female. And in fact, some of the oldest known stories about the Pleiades come from the Aboriginal Australians, where they were often known as the 7 ladies. So again, this is the symbolism of pillar 18. And I hope from the night sky you can kind of see the matching symbolism. Does it make sense to a little bit? Okay. So now it's time to look at the other central pillar in enclosure D, pillar 31. On this pillar's necklace is a pendant of a bull shown next to the white arrow. I think this T-shaped pillar is representing Orion, the mighty hunter, and Taurus, the bull. And as you can see in the constellation image, Orion is right there next to Taurus, the bull. So if you were at Göbekli Tepe at about 9600 BC and you were standing between the central pillars of enclosure D staring south, the same way the pillars are facing, as the sun rises on the winter solstice, you would see it being heralded by the Pleiades in Taurus. You would also see the direction in the sky where the virtual ecliptic line passes through Taurus and Gemini. So I mentioned this asterism that I'm going to talk about that they seem to really know about. And this asterism is called the Golden Gate of the Ecliptic. An asterism is a pattern of stars. It's not a constellation, but it can lie within a constellation. The Golden Gate of the Ecliptic asterism is in the constellation of Taurus, and it has been known about for many thousands of years. It is marked by the 2 gold stars above. So the asterism is built by the 2 eye-catching open star clusters of the Pleiades and the V-shaped Hyades, and they stand as sentinels on either side of the ecliptic line. And as I mentioned before, all of the heavenly bodies move through there, so this is actually the perfect point for astronomical observations of the celestials and studying these movements. So the ancients were able to predict when eclipses, solstices, and equinoxes would take place, and it allowed them to create alignments like we find at Karahan Tepe and at many other astonishing sites from around the world. And as I mentioned in Hugh's lecture, he'll delve into our discovery of the winter solstice at Karahan Tepe in 2021. I will just say that it was amazing. We were probably the first people to see that happen in 10,000 years. So we were beyond ecstatic. So this is another example of ancient astronomers marking the Golden Gate of the ecliptic. This limestone tablet was found in Malta at a site called Tal Hadi, and it's about 4,500 years old. The site is in ruins today. So the top image is the Tal Hadi sky tablet, matched the starry sky with the ecliptic line showing Taurus prominently. And the below image is an example of how the Tal Hadi sky tablet would have been used to measure the ecliptic latitude of the moon and the planets, meaning the ancients were not dummies when it came to the sky and the heavens and the movements. So there are even older examples of this asterism. It's probably portrayed in the cave of La Tête du Lion. Sorry about the pronunciation. So it's dated to the lower Solutrean epoch between about 17,000 and 21,000 years ago. So what's also extremely interesting in that particular area of the sky, it's a crossing point for the Milky Way and the ecliptic line. They intersect between these specific constellations above, and the white X marks this intersection. There are 2 of these intersections on the Milky Way and the ecliptic, including those that involve the road of the dead or the path of souls. The ancient Greeks believed that the souls reside in the Milky Way between incarnations, and that there were 2 intersections or gates on the Milky Way, one being the intersection between Scorpio and Sagittarius, where Ophiuchus resides, and it's known as the Sagittarius Gate. On the opposite side, at about 180 degrees, is the Gemini-Taurus Gate near Orion, and the Greeks called this gate the Silver Gate. So I talked about the twin pillars in Enclosure D, but there is another very important pillar in that enclosure, and it's Pillar 43, also known as the Vulture Stone. And this, just showing the layout for you, and circled in red is where the Vulture Stone lies within Enclosure D. So I think Pillar 43 was also related to the winter solstice sunrise alignment, just like at Karahan Tepe. On December 21st, after the sun rose and began its arc across the sky, the sun's rays would hit the Vulture Stone. So this section of Pillar 43, marked in white, I recreated for you in the white box next to it. It shows a headless person, perhaps in the excarnation ritual, next to the vulture whom devours the dead, and also participates in the soul's journey afterwards. And also shown is the venomous and deadly scorpion, and this is the stage of death and dismemberment. The ancient Egyptians were influenced by the legacy of the Taj-Templar people and knew the scorpion and its toxicity and venerated it since the pre-dynastic era. They used the scorpion as a symbol of their goddess Serket. She protects the body and the viscera of the dead and accompanies them in their journey to the afterlife as a psychopomp. And we can now tell that shamanism and psychopomps were used and in rituals heavily, even in the Paleolithic times. So this may be a depiction of the ancient way of the souls, a bridge of sorts to be crossed on your deathly journey. In many myths of the ancient Siberian indigenous peoples, and also Native Americans, as well as other cultures, a river must be crossed to get to the underworld, or a road must be traveled to reach it. In Greek mythology, the river Styx is the main underworld river that the ferryman Chiron would take the souls of the dead across into Hades. Our vulture in this case is probably an earlier form of Chiron. Even the Aboriginal Australians viewed the Milky Way as their ancestors' path and the twinkling of the stars as their campfires. So this section may be showing the head as the soul, being carried through the Milky Way to reach another level of the cosmos. The artifact in the red square is from North America, and it's showing the soul carried by a shaman traveling through the cosmos with his spirit guide, a raptor. The important thing is that these artifacts are basically showing the same idea, even though they're separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years in time. The top of this section on Pillar 43 is interesting, and it's talked about a lot, and a lot of people describe it as ancient bags. I don't really believe that, but there is something to do with it, and if I had a longer space, I would delve into it. So the ancient Mesopotamians regarded the sky as a series of 3 domes covering the rectangular flat earth. On this pillar, these 3 bag or basket-like structures probably relate to the 3-tiered cosmos that shamans travel to. And these are the upper, middle, and lower worlds. So this pillar, the very front of it, nobody talks about. And I am unsure why, because if we're wanting to make connections from ancient cultures across the world, the front of this pillar is a star to do that. So carved on it is an arm, a spider, and a feline. So first, let's look at why the feline was important to the ancients. They were sacred in shamanism, particularly leopards and panthers and jaguars. The ancient Egyptian deity called Seshat was often shown wearing the skin of a leopard, and they were connected because the spots of the leopard represented the stars. She was the goddess of writing, measurement, and of surveying both the earth and the heavens. She was the overseer of the libraries. In this image, a groma device is shown next to the carving of Seshat. So a groma is a surveying device used to measure angles and lines. She always oversaw the foundation ceremony for the ancient Egyptian religious buildings. This ritual was also known as the stretching of the cord ceremony, where she would symbolically use her tools to guide measurement of the foundation structure. And actually, I think that in many of the images of her headdress is even displaying the image of this surveying device, the groma. And actually, if you look at a lot of ancient artifacts, especially cylinder seals, you'll see that this device is portrayed there. And I just find that extremely fascinating, and a lot of people just don't notice this. And here's a better image of the groma shown with the deities there, Enki, Ea. So it's interesting because the same groupings are always found together: a deity or person of some importance, a surveying or measurement device, a feline, and often a bird. And this was around the world, these animals, these figures, for some reason, and it has to do with migrations and myths. Felines are tied to ancient measurement and surveying of the heavens in many different ancient cultures. This is an enlarged image of an ancient vase from Argentina, and the leopard spots are represented as stars. And in this case, the feline is actually tethered to a stylized groma surveying device. In Theban royal tombs, leopard skin clothing was sometimes depicted with stars, which represented the celestial symbolism of the leopard. Upon the death of an individual, one of the priests or shamans' duties was to go into a trance to search for the ka, or the soul of the deceased person, for the opening of the mouth ceremony. So these twin feline pelts from Çatalhöyük, this is also a site in Turkey. It's, of course, a bit younger than the other Taj-Toplar sites. I've been here many times. It's fascinating. So these leaping leopards have interesting star-like symbols on their pelts, and this was found inside of a home. And even at Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the feline was also related to the stars and surveying. And as you can see above, with the T-shapes, crosses, and other symbols associated with them. So again, the feline, and I'm going to move on over to the human arm, which is next to the feline. I don't know why everybody misses this because it's so important. And this is just the location of the arm for you to its placement on the pillar. So in some Native American cultures, the constellation Orion was seen as a hand or an arm, and this ties in perfectly with the vulture stone and its symbolism. And Orion's 3 belt stars make up the wrist. In the palm of the Orion hand, underneath the 3 belt stars, is what's called an oji, or a portal. This is the area of the Orion Nebula. This portal was an important place for shamans and soul travel. After one dies, his soul can only cross to the portal at certain times of the year. Trying the leap to the Orion portal was very dangerous to the soul. And in the wintertime, the long arm and hand would reach out, catching and assisting the soul on its forward journey. So this is just a sort of recreation for you to see how amazing the figure is actually on that pillar. It's often to do, so in Native Americans, this myth is tied with twins and all of the same things that I mentioned before in the myth, and it makes sense because these people traveled from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge, and this is why the Native Americans have the same types of stories. And if you look closely, the hand, arm even has the 3 belt stars. Hopefully you can see it there on the wrist, the bracelet. So this is an artifact from the mound builders in North America. It shows Orion as the hand, and above it in the circular pattern is a representation of the underworld. These portal symbols are found all across the world. In the Americas, Turkey, China, Iran, Israel, everywhere you look, you're going to find this same symbolism. So the last symbol on the stone, the front of the stone, is a spider. And in Native American cultures, the spider was the creator of the world, and its web was a way of travel. The 4-lobe symbol in the center of the spider is the underworld. And please notice the hand symbolism around the edges of the round mound builder artifact. So the souls in the winter that were not brave enough to jump to the OG portal, or those that jumped and could not make it to Orion's hand, would be caught by Spider Woman or Spider Mother in her web. From there, she would either help guide you to the other world to be with your ancestors, or she would send you back to be reincarnated. So in ancient cultures of Siberia and the Americas, when someone dies, the soul must be separated from the body, usually through burning or breaking or dismemberment. and often the bones would be kept until the winter time for this ritual. And this was to allow the free souls depicted here to avoid the great adversary. So the adversary is a skull-crushing feathered serpent or raptor, which was active in the summer. If the adversary grabs your soul, and if what you have done in life is not pleasing to him, he will smash your skull and pick your brains out, and you will be erased from existence forever. So the winter brings the feline from the watery underworld, and he has no need for feathers. He appeared in the winter when it was safe for the souls to make the jump. So highlighted in blue in the corner is an amazingly preserved 5,000-year-old artwork from a necropolis in the Altai mountain region of Siberia. And the costumes shown exactly match the Native American Indian costumes that we've seen so many times. And this is because of the prehistoric land bridge and the migrations. Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that shamanism started in the Paleolithic era. The term shaman derives from the Tungus people of Siberia, and a shaman's principal role was to act as a mediator between the three worlds. The shaman is aided by his or her ritual tools and spirit helpers. Ritual tools include drums or other musical instruments, along with various other items. So if you notice on this drum, there are 3 curved lines. This represents the 3-tiered cosmos that I spoke about earlier. And the hole or circle in the middle of the drum is where the shaman spirit will ascend to the 3 realms. The hole in the top of the yurt is where the shamans would ascend towards the North Pole. And this is a ritual that's contemporary today. It's still taking place. And the same principle applies to the portals or soul holes, as my friend Andrew Collins calls them, at the Taj Templar sites. So in this image, one of these soul holes is depicted, and it's located in Enclosure D, which I spoke about earlier. Behind this Siberian shaman costumes are Axis Mundi poles to be climbed to reach the other worlds during trance. And the top of the Axis Mundi pole or world tree would always be pointed to the pole star. This is an Olmec artifact from Mesoamerica. I don't know if many of you know about the Olmecs, but I've been to so many of their sites. I've had many encounters, dangerous encounters. We've actually discovered, me and Hugh, an Olmec artifact that's not mentioned anywhere, but we did get chased by a guy with a machete during that day. So the Olmecs are dated to around 1500 BC or so, but most likely they are very much older. And mitochondrial DNA has been tested from Olmec skeletons, proving they were indigenous Americans with roots from Siberia. You might hear a lot of nonsense that the Olmecs were Africans or some things like this, and this is absolutely untrue. There is no evidence for that, and if there was, I would, speak about it. I have a few articles about the Olmecs up online, if you're interested. So in this image on the Olmec mask portrayed in the white circle is a shaman or free soul climbing the Axis Mundi to reach one of the 3 worlds. It's traveling up the pole towards the north, and uses this H-shaped ball court. So another important tool of the shaman are models of the animal helpers. Tutelary animal guides, most frequently birds, felines, and snakes, were ritually sent to aid the shaman on their journey. James Mellart, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's the archaeologist that excavated at the 9,000-year-old site of Çatalhöyük in Turkey, and he describes the drawings above from that site as humans wearing vulture skins. The shaman wearing the vulture feathers and transforming into the vulture as a spirit helper may have at times been the psychopomp that guided the souls through the gates on the Milky Way, helping them to reach their final destinations. So the red anthropomorphic vulture figure is also from Çatalhöyük, and you can see that the costumes that were worn 9,000 years ago are very similar to the ones still worn today during rituals in Siberia. So the ancient Olmecs of Mexico also believed that their shamans could transform into spirit helper animals. So again, this is a worldwide idea, and we think it might have stemmed from Siberia. It's a strange idea, but the facts seem and the evidence seem to show this. So this is another artifact showing a shaman in trance, and his soul is traveling through the three-tiered cosmos with the help from a twin-headed bird spirit helper. So I want to talk about something else that we find related to shamans quickly. There seems to be an implicit consensus among specialists that the grimace or bare teeth motif represents the face of the shaman during trance. In the transformative stage of a shaman's journey, with teeth clenched and drug or other mechanism-induced concentration or spasm. In effect, he has achieved a hyper-real supernatural state and is prepared to communicate directly with the otherworldly spirits. And again, here in the image is an artifact from Göbekli Tepe, and it seems to show the same motif that's found around the world. And so again, these figures are from Göbekli and Göbekli Tepe, and they are just showing the same ideas as well. And also, all of these images to me are just fascinating, and I can't really fathom why some of the archaeologists don't connect these sites or use the heavens. I mean, the precedent is there at many of these sites, and we just sort of have to change this slowly. It takes people outside of archaeology and anthropology to figure this out, because academia doesn't seem to be doing it. So we've got to work hard to understand this, and that means you guys have to do it as well. So this was the giant that was found at Göbekli Tepe. It's extremely tall. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but Hugh will mention it. And there are many theories about what this is representing, perhaps famine, starvation, wintertime, food scarcity. But please note the protruding clavicle bone in both figures and the ribs. However, it could mean something else, and I think this is the case. So these redrawn petroglyphs are more than 10,000 years old and are from Siberia and described as proto-shamans. So I'm quoting an excerpt from the book Shamans and Symbols, The Prehistory of Semiotics in Rock Art. A would-be shaman goes into trance in order to undergo the mystical dismemberment of the body by his spirits, the loss of his flesh, and to contemplate his own skeleton. The experience of death and rebirth is the most important condition for obtaining the power of shamanizing. Only after this experience does a shaman reach the level at which his spirit animal assistant sees fit to appear to him. And at this point, the shaman is contemplating his inner self and place in the universe. And in some of the oldest known artifacts and petroglyphs, you'll find a shaman-like figure portrayed in an ithyphallic or excited manner. And this is the shaman in ecstasy. And this is a trance-like state. And these artifacts you can see from Göbekli Tepe, Göbekli Tepe, Say-Birch, which is 11,000 years old, and that's the top panel there. So if I have time, can anybody tell me how long I've been up here? Do I have time? Okay. So the divine Mayan hero twins represent complementary forces such as the sun and the moon, life and death. And these hero twins are bird hunters. And while fighting the god Seven Macaw, one twin loses an arm. So this is interesting relating to Pillar 43 and the arm. So they challenge the gods to a game to retrieve the head and body of their father from the underworld. The gods pull many tricks on them and try to kill the twins. The gods do succeed, but the twins are brought back to life in a river, probably the Milky Way. So the twins end up winning, and they destroy the gods. But this game is known to be a religious event of creation. The hero twins are probably the Gemini constellation, and the ecliptic line that goes through it is important again. The game played on the ground itself is a mimicry of the play of the heavenly bodies along that virtual line. So, if you know, in Gemini, there are two interesting stars at each waist of the twins circled in red. And just like in the ancient pelota ball game, the players had to hit the ball through the hoop with their hips only. And because the ecliptic line goes through the twins at their hips, I just thought that was pretty cool. So the sun may represent the ball in the ancient pelota game traveling through the Gemini twins along the ecliptic line from their hip area. And again, it was a recreation of celestial events, and it was extremely important, and sacrifices were involved, so the seriousness of these games is beyond really comprehension for us today. So again, this is the hero twins, but in North America and mountain builder culture. And the same ideas there, the axis mundi pole, the symbols, the T-shapes, the crosses, all of that, those kinds of ideas. And here again, the divine twins have been shown at ancient sites, extremely ancient sites around the world, and they are just there. You just have to look for them. But they are related to the night sky, and when you see artifacts like this, don't just assume, oh look, there's, twins. No, they mean something more. And at Hagar Kim, there's ancient altars with the H shape, just like that's found on the belts at Göbekli Tepe and the H-shaped ball courts of the Mesoamerica. And these temples also have solar alignments, which lets us know, we've got to pay attention to the symbols and the sky. So this is just showing you this H symbol, and it's just really found all around the world. The ball court, again, just different places, but you have to pay attention to the details, and a lot of people don't do that, but I'm quite weird, and I sort of obsess over that. And this guy is from South America, and he's got the H shape, and he's in a fetal position. And this is Reef Bay Pool petroglyphs from the Virgin Islands, and there's an H circle, or an H symbol circled in red, and then the free souls are around it in the white, and they are trying to make it to the underworld through the watery way, and the stone is actually next to a body of water, which is extremely fitting for the purpose. So this is a Shigar idol, and it was found in a peat bog in the Russian Ural mountain range, and it's 11,500 years old. It's 17 feet tall. It's a giant, just like the one from Karahan Tepe. And peat bogs and marshy lands were considered to be the realm of the dead and the watery underworld. And it's probably showing a shaman as a psychopomp, and the souls are encircled in red, and they are climbing the axis mundi poles to reach the other destinations. And it is the same idea found in Mesoamerica. And this is just images showing that this is from shamans from Chile, and their axis mundi poles are these steps that lead you up to the heavens. And there is shown a Siberian shaman from the Altai Kizi area, and you can see it's just the exact same thing from the shamans in Chile. And so we know where we got our ancestry, or where they carried it from. So this is a sagebrush panel. I'll finish here really quickly. On the bottom of the slide, it's about 11,000 years old, and it's part of another Taş Tepeler site in Turkey. And it's also showing a version of the myth I read earlier relating to Gemini, Orion, and Taurus. And the slaying of the bull for the fertility of the earth is highlighted in black. And highlighted in black on the opposite side are the divine twin beings shown as felines, and the man is helping with creation. What's interesting is that in some stories, the Milky Way was created when a primordial being did something to himself to produce a certain white substance. I'll just leave it at that. But, I mean, you can find this same portrayal everywhere you look around the world. You just have to be tedious with it. And this is from the Indus Valley, and it absolutely is showing the same imagery from the night sky, the Taurus laying the bull. And even the king Yemo is portrayed here with his crown on the bottom, and the twins. And so this concept has been around forever, and it maintained its important key aspects. And religion does that to us. We keep these ideas, and they last. So I'm going to end there, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming to my talk, and I hope you enjoyed it.